to read, learn, ponder and question things, so much so that the first word revealed from the book was read. But it doesn't stop there. The book goes on to challenge its readers, especially the scientists and scholars among them, with statements such as, "We will show them our signs in the universe and in their own selves until it becomes manifest to them that this is the truth." And these similes we put forward for mankind, but none will understand them except those who have knowledge. The author of this book gives us the total freedom to either believe or disbelieve in what he wrote, but at the same time the author tells us that he also has the freedom to determine our fate after death, with either eternal happiness in paradise or an eternal painful punishment in hell. There is no third option. The following is just one quote from the book's many profound passages, given as a quick and simple example to help you understand what I mean. The author swears that indeed what is written inside this book is very serious and is not a joke, but the amazing part is that the author swears by two phenomena that at the time the book was revealed, 1400 years ago, were completely unknown to man in any way. The quote is as follows: "By the sky which has the bounce, by the earth which has the crack." Indeed, what is written inside the book is very serious, and it's not in jest. Do you know what these two phenomena are? I will tell you. Simply put, when space is stretched out, it bounces, while when the Earth is stretched out, it cracks. Although we can't see a bounce in the sky, in 1916, Einstein's game-changing theory of relativity determined that spatial bodies move in the fabric of space in much the same way as a child bounces on a stretchy trampoline. And although we've always intuitively known that rocks are incredibly strong and can't be stretched apart, in 1789, when Iceland's sulfur fissure was opened, and in 1927, when the first crack in the earth was recorded in the Arizona desert, it was confirmed just how fragile and changeable our earth really is. A book from 1962 entitled Notes on Earth Fissures in Southern Arizona by Geraldine Robinson and Dennis Peterson published the information about the cracks in the earth that were first recorded in Arizona. So it was only in 1916 that science learned that the sky, space, has a bounce to it, which is at the heart of Einstein's theory of relativity. And it was only in 1927 that science learned that the Earth has cracks. Yet, not unsurprisingly, the ancient book that I speak of contains numerous proofs in the form of scientific facts and natural... But did you know that NASA has something called fluorescence maps, which measure chlorophyll fluorescence light and offers a new view of the world's land plants? These maps are based on data collected from the spectrometer aboard a Japanese satellite and are the first to focus on land vegetation and to cover the entire globe. Chlorophyll fluorescence offers a more direct window into the inner workings of the photosynthetic machinery of plants from space. With chlorophyll fluorescence, we should be able to tell immediately if plants are under environmental stress before outward signs of browning or yellowing of leaves become visible. So said Elizabeth Middleton, a NASA Goddard-based biologist and a member of the team that created the maps. Joanna Joyner of the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center says humans can't see this light. Our eyes just aren't that sensitive. To see the light that's emitted from plants all over the world, we have to use scientific instruments that are placed on satellites. It's the result of a cellular process where light from the sun is transformed and released as fluorescent light in a phenomenon called chlorophyll fluorescence. The light exits the plant cell and is released into the atmosphere, which is why NASA stated that their satellite instruments have given climate researchers an unexpected global view from space of a fluorescent glow from land chlorophyll. But would you believe me if I told you that that bottle of olive oil on your kitchen counter also gives off a fluorescent glow that can be seen in space in much the same way as planet Earth is unique among the majority of oils in that it is a product of a fruit rather than a seed. As such, it has a different constitution and naturally contains the green-coloured plant pigment chlorophyll, which is fluorescent. Though it may appear dull under regular light, hit a clear glass of olive oil with a green laser and the oil will glow red. And it's not just lasers that will get the olive oil to fluoresce, ultraviolet lamps will do the trick too and are accepted as an official method for the identification of the purity and grade of olive oil, according to the US Bureau of Standards. But before the existence of these specialised instruments that detect the fluorescent light emitted by plants on planet Earth from satellites in space, or the discovery of the quantum theory that explains how it all works, the Qur'an actually addressed this issue in a fascinating verse. In verse 35 of chapter 24, the Qur'an says, Allah, God, is the light of the heavens and the earth. The parable of his light is like a niche, pillar. In it is a lamp. The lamp is in a glass. The glass is like a brilliant planet lit from an olive tree, which is neither of the east, i.e. neither this tree gets sun rays only in the morning, nor of the west, i.e. nor does it get sun rays only in the afternoon. But it is exposed to the sun all day long. Its olive oil would almost glow forth of itself, though no fire touched it, light upon light. The verse likens the glow of the planet with the glow of the oil derived from olives, as both shine in the same way, by fluorescence. Both are also dependent on the same physical phenomenon fueled by quantum physics, and both emit a coherent light. Coherence is one of the most important concepts in quantum physics and is strongly related to the ability of light to exhibit interference effects. A light field is called coherent, like the light from lasers, when there is a fixed phase relationship between the electric field values at different locations or at different times. Coherent light waves are waves with a constant phase difference. They will have the same frequency and wavelength. When two waves meet, they will interfere and superpose. This is called the quantum principle of superposition, and it's at the heart of quantum mechanics. If you look in the dictionary, the word superposition technically means one upon another. So when God says light upon light in the verse I mentioned just now, he's referring to superposition of light waves, one upon another. The fact that the Qur'an states that olive oil glows is in and of itself a miracle, as lasers and ultraviolet lamps now used to detect such a glow did not exist back then in any way, shape or form. Although planet is defined as a body that orbits a star, in our case the sun, and produces no light of its own, and although olive oil is dull under regular light, not only did the Qur'an inform us that they both glow on their own, but the Qur'an also asserts that they glow in a similar manner. What's more, the Qur'an refers to it as light upon light, long before the existence of the quantum theory of coherence, which now confirms this superposition of light waves. So the question remains, how could the Qur'an have known to use such a comprehensive analogy 1400 years ago? It tracks them towards each other. Without gravity, life as we know it on Earth would not exist. The Earth would stop orbiting the sun and drift in different directions. The layers of the Earth, from the atmosphere to the soil and everything down to the crust, would drift away from the Earth. Even the moon would drift away. So thank God for gravity. Back when a young Isaac Newton was sitting under an apple tree in his garden and an apple fell on his head, he concluded gravity must be pulling the apple down. But years later, Einstein had another theory. Gravity is not pulling us down, space is pushing us down. Einstein predicted that through gravity, objects actually warp the space-time around them, such that the movement of every object from a human to a supermassive black hole produces ripples in the space-time continuum. He used this analogy to explain it further. Just as a boat sailing through the ocean produces waves in the water, ripples, moving masses like stars or black holes produce gravitational waves, ripples in the fabric of space-time. On February the 11th, 2016, David Wrights, the executive director of the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, reported that researchers had detected gravitational waves that were created by the merging of two black holes. This is quite an historic detection by all accounts and confirms a major prediction of Einstein's from over 100 years ago. But what's even more fascinating is that the Qur'an spoke of gravitational waves over 1400 years ago. To more clearly illustrate what these gravitational waves are like, Einstein himself, as well as physics professors and teachers alike, compare the movement of spatial bodies to a child's bounce on a trampoline. And in verse 11 of chapter 86 of the Qur'an, it is written, "By the heaven which is characterized by its bounce." The Qur'an swears by this unique characteristic function of the heavens, or space, as we commonly call it, by alluding to the distinct movement, the bounce, produced when heavenly bodies move in space. Now, staying within the gravity family, let's take a look at gravity's younger, lesser-known brother, microgravity. Question for you. When I say the word astronaut, what's the first thing that pops into your head? I'm going to go ahead and guess it's not the word swimmer, right? Because astronauts fly up into space the exact opposite direction from diving into the ocean. But did you know that astronauts have to be really good swimmers? Why do astronauts need to know how to swim so well? Because according to NASA, floating in space is a lot like floating in water, so much so that NASA has built a massive pool 10 times larger than an Olympic-sized one, so their astronauts can train for spacewalks by going for a swim. The pool is called the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, and it simulates the conditions found in the weightlessness of space. The underground laboratory contains 6.2 million gallons of water and is used by astronauts decked out in their full spacesuits to carry out the tasks they'll be expected to perform in space. With the assistance of scuba divers, astronauts train 7 hours in the pool for every 1 hour they'll spend on a spacewalk. Interesting. There's no water on space, and yet NASA trains their astronauts for spacewalks in the world's largest swimming pool. You know what else is interesting? The Qur'an linked space with water as well, when it said, "And it is He who created the night and the day, and the sun and the moon, all in an orbit are swimming." That's right. The Qur'an used the word swimming to emphasize the microgravity and weightless environment of space. Now let's take a quick look at the transmission of gravitational effects. After all, if space has waves and ripples like water, then what's to keep anything in its place and stop it from just floating off? 2 words: gravitational anchors, a term coined by the physicist Robert Tootle in 2012. To understand this better, let's borrow a beautiful analogy from the physicists Thomas van Vlaanderen and Jean-Pierre Vigier, who explain the transmission of gravitational effects by asking us to imagine a buoy floating on the surface of the sea. The buoy is connected by a chain to an anchor that is holding it in place. If the anchor is moved, the chain causes the buoy to move too. In turn, the buoy's motion sets off waves in the water. If we translate this analogy into gravitational language, the anchor is the source mass, the chain is the gravitational force, and the buoy is the target mass. The waves in the water caused by the buoy's movement and induced by the motion of the anchor travel in the water and are analogous to gravitational waves. Fortunately for planet Earth, research has shown that our Sun is the gravitational anchor of the solar system. At the same time, the black hole at the centre of nearly every galaxy, including our own, acts as a gravitational anchor for the galaxies, holding them together in space. When 1400 years ago, the Qur'an explained how the universe was created, it confirmed that the earth needs to be anchored by saying, "And He, God, has dropped into the earth what anchors it, lest it should shift with you." In another verse it is written, "He, God, made in the earth what anchors it from high above." It's worth mentioning that the Qur'an uses the verb dropped and the term from high above it in the above verses because, interestingly enough, in 2016, David Wrights proved that gravitational waves from those colliding black holes in space pass through Earth. But there are some who would use the concept of gravity to go in the other direction and argue that there is no such thing as God. In his book, A Universe from Nothing, Why There Is Something Rather Than Nothing, Lawrence Krauss says that the total amount of energy in the universe is exactly 0. This is the case because the universe's positive energy in the form of matter is cancelled out by its negative energy in the form of gravity. In other words, gravity balances matter. Therefore, the net energy of the universe is 0, meaning that the universe is essentially nothing. Krauss argues that if the universe really adds up to nothing, then why must we feel compelled to invoke God to explain its cause? Well, don't worry, Mr. Krauss. When you say gravity balances matter, the Qur'an addresses this too. The Qur'an points out that what anchors the earth balances everything when it says, "We have spread out the earth and dropped into earth what anchors it, gravity, and caused to grow therein of everything, matter, in due balance." So, let's take a minute to appreciate this wonderful pull of nature we call. The founders of this theory are 2 scientists from the 1920s, Georges Lemaitre and Alexander Friedmann. They both used Einstein's theory of relativity to prove that the universe is in a constant state of expansion. Then in 1929, the American astronomer Edwin Hubble confirmed this theory again after observing evidence that virtually all clusters of galaxies appear to be moving away from all other clusters, which also indicates that the entire universe is expanding. Physicists agree that the theory is sound because the universe is, in fact, still expanding even now. If you open the Qur'an and read through all the verses that speak about the origin of the universe, you will find that it confirms what physicists have been saying about the same topic. For example, in chapter 51, verse 47, it says, "And it is we, God, who have built the heaven with our creative power. And verily it is we, God, who are steadily expanding it." What we know about the universe is that space was created first and gave birth to particles, galaxies, stars, the Earth, and you and me. In several places, the Qur'an also addresses the order in which various things were created in a manner consistent with what science has discovered. For example, in chapter 18, verse 51, it says, "I, God, did not make them witness to the creation of the heavens and the earth, or to the creation of themselves." The universe expanded from very high density and exploded in gravitational waves. The same gravitational waves from those colliding black holes in space that passed through the Earth, causing the universe to stretch and expand over and over again. In chapter 41 of the Qur'an, verse 10, it says, "In 4 days he made in the earth what anchors from high above it, and put barakah in it, and equally measured out sustenance of its dwellers for those who ask." Let's break down the meaning of this verse. When God says he made in the earth what anchors from above it, he's referring to the gravitational waves that are coming back from those colliding black holes in space that act as gravitational anchors to anchor the earth and anchor things to the earth. Then God says he put barakah in it. Barakah is a word that people commonly use for blessings, but it actually has a deeper meaning. It means to grow and increase in volume above and beyond expectations, emphasizing that the earth started out small but constantly grew larger and larger. A strange type of matter caused the expansion of the universe in its early stages. This matter behaved very differently from the matter that we're familiar with today, because instead of attracting other matter, it repels it. This has led physicists to call it antimatter. Sounds to me like antisocial matter. Antimatter actually disobeys energy and momentum conservation. It disobeys symmetric charge conjugation and parity, and it disobeys our current one-directional time arrow and disobeys causality. Because the early universe was filled with this type of self-repelling, disobedient matter, everything would be pushing against everything else, and that would account for the sudden explosion that gave birth to the universe. Matter and antimatter particles are always produced in pairs, and if they come in contact, they annihilate one another, leaving behind pure energy. So why do we still see matter today? As far as physicists can tell, it's only because in the end, there was one extra matter particle for every billion matter-antimatter pairs. After that, the first stars began to form. They formed from the dense gas of the young universe, which came about when a cloud increased in density and then collapsed due to the action of the gravitational pull of gravity. The gravitational pull of gravity managed to anchor more and more matter from the collapsed cloud, resulting in the densest gas clumping and anchoring together, which eventually led to the formation of stars and even galaxies. The formation of stars then paved the way for the formation of everything else in our universe. You see, when a massive star with a mass several times that of the Sun reaches the end of its life, it compresses and explodes as a supernova. And it appears that exploding stars, or supernova, are extremely efficient at producing the dust or first solid particles that later forms Earth, like planets, rocks, and people. Verse 11 of that same chapter in the Qur'an addresses these points when it says, "Then he directed himself to the heaven while it was smoke, and said to the heavens and the earth, 'Come into being, willing to obey or disobey.' They both said, 'We are willing to obey.'" From this verse we can derive many things. Firstly, that space was created before Earth. As God says, he created the earth while heaven was a smoke. When God says, while it was smoke about the heavens, it's confirming scientific belief that the smoke resulting from the exploding stars or supernova existed in space for a long time before forming the rocky embryo of the Earth. So essentially, the Earth was a giant lump of this cosmic dust anchored by gravity that constantly grew larger and larger. Once it became large enough, gravity caused the Earth to become rounded, forming what is called a rocky embryo. And after 100 million years of this rocky embryo growing, voila, we have planet Earth. The Qur'an even alludes to the matter and antimatter that existed in the universe in this verse when it says, willing to obey or disobey, and then concludes by telling us that it is matter, not antimatter, that managed to survive and still exists to this day, when it says, they said we are willing to obey. When astrophysicists joke, they say supernovae have bad habits because they belch out huge quantities of smoke known as cosmic dust. Dr. Loretta Dunn of Cardiff University describes cosmic dust by saying, "Cosmic dust consists of tiny particles of solid material floating around in the space between stars. It's not the same as house dust, but more akin to cigarette smoke." Cosmic dust was also responsible for blocking the light emitted from stars and galaxies, meaning that for the first 380,000 years or so, our universe was essentially too opaque to shine. Physicist Imre Bartos from Columbia University states gravitational waves arrive at Earth long before any light does, which is exactly what verse 12 of chapter 41 indicates. He made in each heaven its affair and adorned the nearest heaven with lamps. By using the lamps as an analogy for light, this verse reflects the fact that the universe was in darkness in its early stages. It further reflects the sequence of events we discussed earlier, as God mentioned what anchors first, then mentioned the light, implying that gravitational waves arrived at Earth long before any light did, just as physicists such as Imre Bartos would confirm over 1400 years later. I don't mean in a mathematical sense, we're pretty good at that, but rather we're poor at judging scale and perspective. Have you considered, for example, that there's a 31-year difference between a million and a billion? Astrophysicists introduced the cosmic calendar and collapsed the entire history of the universe into just a single year. By employing this calendar metaphor, the human mind is able to approach unhuman timescales in a human format. In his book, The Dragons of Eden, and his TV series Cosmos, Carl Sagan popularized a method to visualize the chronology of the universe. It's simple. Take its current age, 13.8 billion years, and scale it down to a single year, the cosmic calendar, where midnight on the 1st of January marks the start of time, the Big Bang, and the end of the 31st of December is right now, this very moment. Is a blink of an eye, a quarter of a second. You are insignificant in the grand scheme of the cosmos. But don't let that get you down. You're also extremely fortunate to have this fleeting moment in the sun. The average ejaculate has 250 million sperm cells, and you made it, buddy. Best make the best of your day. Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar did not only help us understand the age of the universe in an easier way, but it also helped us understand what is meant by two groups of verses in the Holy Qur'an, addressing the same topic, but written in a different way. The first group of verses says, "It is He, God, who created the heavens and earth in 6 days." And the other group of verses says, "It is He who created the heavens and the earth and what is between them in 6 days." This is the Quranic cosmic calendar revealed over 1400 years ago. And let me explain why I believe the Holy Qur'an introduced the cosmic calendar approach first, before Carl Sagan. The answer is simple. It's because there is a great similarity between the Holy Qur'an's cosmic calendar and Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar. These similarities are as follows. First, by employing this calendar metaphor, the human mind is able to approach unhuman timescales in a human format. That's why Carl Sagan popularized the cosmic calendar in the first place and collapsed the entire history of the universe into just a single year, 365 days. And the Holy Qur'an introduced the cosmic calendar and collapsed the entire history of the universe into just 6 days. Second, Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar tells us that the Earth was formed in the end of August, which means it was formed in the 8th month out of 12 months, which is precisely at the point when the universe was in 2/3 of its age. Now, similarly, the Holy Qur'an's cosmic calendar tells us that the Earth was formed in 4 days out of a total of 6 days, being again when the universe was exactly in 2/3 of its age. This is written in chapter 41, from verses 10 until 12. "In 4 days he made in the earth what anchors it from high above it, and put barak in it, and equally measured out sustenance of its dwellers for those who ask. Then he directed himself to the heaven while it was smoke." Then verse 12 says, "And he completed them 7 heavens within 2 days, and he made in each heaven its affair, and adorned the nearest heaven with lamps." Qur'an did it first. When you read the Holy Qur'an, you'll know that the Qur'an's 6-day cosmic calendar doesn't mean that the universe is going to end in the final second of the 6th day. The scale just continues condensing itself to accommodate the increasing age of the cosmos. When the Holy Qur'an says it is He, God, who created the heavens and earth in 6 days, and in another verse says it is He who created the heavens and the earth and what is between them in 6 days, it is implying that what is between the heavens and the earth have not yet ended. Every moment there is something created in between the heavens and the earth. So now I say, how clever the Holy Qur'an is. Time goes on, and still its cosmic calendar scale remains constant at just 6 days. And galaxies, and could you see the light from the great flash of the Big Bang itself? As we look out, we look back in time. We cannot look infinitely far out, since sooner or later we will see the Big Bang. The universe started from an extremely hot and dense era. As we go backwards in time, the universe gets progressively younger, hotter and denser. But how did the cosmos go from extremely hot and dense to being filled with the multitude of stars and galaxies that dominate the night sky today? The Big Bang Theory tells us that the history of the universe's creation is a history of space eras. Each era in space lasted for a specific period and played a specific role in the formation of the universe after the Big Bang. For example, there was an era where light and matter are formed, an era where light and matter are coupled, an era where light and matter separate, and an era where atoms start feeling the gravity of a cosmic web of dark matter. An era where first stars start to form, a reionization era, and so on, until the era of the many stars and galaxies that exist today. Amazingly, even though each of the past eras is considered a stage in a sequence of events that led to the creation of the universe, the evidence of each era still endures, and scientists and astrologers can still see each of them. In an article written for Space.com on March the 17th, 2014, entitled Cosmic Inflation, How It Gave the Universe the Ultimate Kickstart by Carl Tate, there is a very interesting infographic that summarises the Big Bang space era. It's a picture of a man standing over planet Earth and looking towards space. A caption over the image reads, "Looking out in space and back in time." The photo explains that your eyes can see back very far in time to the degree that you might see the great flash of the Big Bang itself. But to reach this farthest point, your eyes must first pass 7 eras that took place over the past 13.7 billion years. These 7 eras are the solar system era, the galaxies era, the proto-galaxies era, a reionization era, the first stars era, then the Dark Ages era, until you reach the great flash era of the Big Bang itself. Each era represents an event that took place during the history of our universe. The Big Bang caused the universe, and thus the galaxies in it, to expand such that most galaxies are moving away from each other. The most distant, and thus the youngest galaxies, are moving away at a very fast speed. Because of the time it takes light to travel, the further away we look, the further back in time we are looking. The further away we look, the younger things are. In fact, as we look farther and further away, we've found galaxies that go back as far as when the universe was less than 1 billion years old, just a few % of its current age. This illustration compares various telescopes and how far back they're able to see. Recently, NASA announced the launch of the Webb telescope as a successor to NASA's iconic Hubble Space Telescope. The Webb telescope has a much bigger mirror than the Hubble. This larger light collecting area means that the Webb can peer farther back in time than the Hubble is capable of doing. In other words, the Hubble telescope can see the equivalent of toddler galaxies, and the Webb telescope will be able to see baby galaxies. Remarkably, long before NASA's Webb or Hubble telescopes that could peer into the mysterious night sky, the Holy Qur'an told us that the history of creation is a history of 7 space eras, each of which took place in a specific order mandated by God in the process of the universe's creation. It's worth noting that at the time of the revelation of the Qur'an, the word space was not known, and people used the word heaven to refer to what lies above the earth. So in the Quranic verses we're going to mention now, the word heaven is referring to what we call space. Just as the Big Bang Theory tells us that the history of the universe's creation is a history of space eras, with each era playing a specific role in the formation of our current universe for a specific period of time, the Holy Qur'an narrates exactly that in chapter 41, verse 12. The Holy Qur'an tells us that during the process of the universe's creation, God completed the heavens as 7 heavens, and he made in each heaven its affair. What's even more interesting is that at the end of that verse, the Holy Qur'an says that God adorned the nearest heaven with lamps. The term lamps here refers to the moon and sun, and now science has proved that the solar system is really in the nearest space era to Earth, as light travels from it to Earth in only 14 hours. In another verse, verse 6, chapter 37, the Qur'an says, "Indeed, we have adorned the nearest heaven with an adornment of planets," reaffirming again that the planets of the solar system are in the nearest space era to Earth. Now, assuming that the current age of the universe is about 13.7 billion years, the timeline of the universe indicates that planet Earth was formed when the universe was about 9.15 billion years old, 2/3 of its current age. The timeline of the universe also indicates that around this time there was a transition from decelerating to accelerating expansion in space. This accelerated expansion prevented any more inflationary structures from entering the horizon and prevented new gravitationally bound structures from forming. This exactly matches the Quranic timeline of the universe mentioned in chapter 41, verses 10 to 12. In these verses, the Holy Qur'an tells us that the earth was formed in 4 days out of a total of 6 days, namely when the universe was 2/3 of its age. Then the verses continue to tell us that after earth had been formed, the heavens, what we now call space, continued to increase in size, what we now call accelerating expansion. In 4 days, he made in the earth what anchors from high above it and put barak in it, and equally measured out sustenance of its dwellers for those who ask. Then he directed himself to the heaven while it was smoke. Then verse 12 says, "And he completed them as 7 heavens within 2 days, and he made in each heaven its affair and adorned the nearest heaven with lamps." And God tells us in the Holy Qur'an that he completed the creation of the space's 7 eras in a flat shape. In chapter 2, verse 29, the Holy Qur'an states, "It is he who created for you all that is in the earth, and then he directed himself to the heaven. So he completed the 7 heavens in a flat shape, and he knows all things." Interestingly enough, the Holy Qur'an also references what modern physicists now refer to as the cosmological principle. The cosmological principle is the notion that the spatial distribution of matter in the universe is homogeneous and isotropic when viewed on a large enough scale. In simpler terms, this principle is telling us that the universe is uniform, and thanks to today's telescopes, we can now observe the uniformity of the universe by looking out and back in time through the different space eras. Now, would you believe that the Holy Qur'an told us 1400 years ago that we can observe this uniformity by doing the same exercise of looking through space eras, when it stated, "Who created 7 heavens one upon another, you will see no non-uniformity in the Merciful One's creation. Look again, can you see any flaw?" This uniformity among the universe's distant regions led physicists to come to an important conclusion in the Big Bang theory, that these distant regions of the universe we see now must have been in contact with each other in the past prior to cosmic inflation. This again is consistent with what the Holy Qur'an revealed 1400 years ago, when it stated, "Have those who disbelieve not considered that both of the heavens and the earth, each of them, was as one united piece, and we separated each of them and made from water every living thing? Then will they not believe?" Think about this for a moment. The Holy Qur'an is telling us that the heavens, or the space eras as we now call them, were one united piece, and then God separated them, just as science now asserts that the distant eras of the universe we see now must have been in contact with each other prior to the Big Bang, and then, thanks to cosmic inflation, became widely separated eras. But it doesn't end there. The verse is also telling us that planet Earth as well was as one united piece, and then God separated it, another consistent fact with science. The young Earth was a rock with the same composition on its surface as in its inner layers. Then the Earth went through a separation process called planetary differentiation, since it was formed 4.5 billion years ago. This differentiation is separating Earth into multiple layers based on their density, meaning that the Earth's interior is zoned by density, with the heaviest material residing at the center, the core, and the lighter stuff floating about at the surface, the crust. One verse of the Holy Qur'an, 2 incredible scientific facts confirm.